So let's start back with another question. We'll start with Tom, so Tom can talk. And I know he loves to talk in public. Oh, you love it. So all of you, one of the interesting things I think is that almost all of you in some ways use different kinds of cutters in your tools, you know, different steel configurations. And Tom's famous for saying that, ironically or not, he said it, or sarcastically or not, saying that, you know, the plane is just a jig for a chisel. So it's really, the iron is important. Whether you know, no matter what you say, you can't plane without it, unless you're on the internet. And so what I'd like to, they plane, you should see the Gossamer see-through shavings on the internet. That crap is sick. And they could kick everybody's butt at those Japanese planing contests. So what I'd like for you to talk about is your choices, you know, why you choose the steel in your, I mean, I know some of you use both, like you sometimes have to use 01 for some things, but predominantly you're A2. Konrad, you're using now what, mostly PMV11, no? Hawk 01 or W1? 01. You guys use mostly 01 and PMV11, some A2, and 01. So we have, you know, at least 3 different kinds of steel up here, and I'd like to talk about why you like that steel and have choose it to put it at the heart of your tool.
I thought we weren't going to talk about metallic.
Yes, I talked about that.
Okay, well, I started out with W1, actually, and that happened by accident, as a lot of things tend to do in life. There was a company making stoneworking tools in a nearby town. They had a really nice stash of Swedish W1 steel that they didn't use anymore. And I picked that over for about 10 years. When it ran out, I had to do something else. And so and at the time, they also did my heat treating. They heat treated in a lead bath. It was a big vat of molten lead.
That's cool.
That was very cool, and also very hot, but what it does is control the temperature completely, precisely. And I was getting great quality out of this. As a side note, the guy who worked there for 30 years, running the lead pot, came to work for me when this company went out of business, and I had his blood tested, and didn't have any elevated lead levels. It's kind of interesting. So I started working with I continued to work with W1. And I started researching steels because I wasn't satisfied with the edge holding ability of the steels that we were working with. And the type of steel, in my opinion, is only half the story. The other half of the story is heat treating, and how well heat treating is done, the control you have over that process. You can take great steel and ruin it very easily. And you can also take pretty mediocre steel and make a very, very fine tool out of it. So I started looking much more deeply into the whole process, because the company I just referred to first decided to stop doing my heat treating, and then went out of business. I outsourced heat treating then, very briefly, because the one and only batch that I sent out came back all shattered in pieces, the blades. And I called up the heat treating company and said, what the hell is this? Well, we won't charge you heat treating, it's okay.
Note to home heat treaters. That juju.
So I'm like, hell with that. And I worked with a friend who had been working in the other company doing overseeing the heat treating the other company. We built a salt pot, this time a lead pot. And I heated for about 6 years, heat treated in about 6 years with that. And I was getting very good results. But in the meantime, I started working with A2, and I did some tests. I convinced myself that the A2 would hold an edge longer, a lot longer. especially if it was cryogenically treated. That research took several years. And at the end of that period, I decided to switch. It's A2, has a high chrome content. It's a little harder to sharpen. But at the time, and this isn't happening quite as much as it used to, but people were constantly asking whether or not I had considered using, some whatever kind of weird steel they came up with. There's all kinds of different tool steels out there, and powder metal steels and so forth and so on, which are used in industry for high-speed cutting applications. And I did play with that, and in fact I made a plane blade out of carbide as well once. But you can't sharpen this stuff with normal sharpening equipment, and I thought it was crazy to make plane blades for people that they couldn't sharpen without heavily investing in diamonds. So I see a business plan. Go for it. So the A2, in spite of the fact that it's got a fair amount of chrome in it, is relatively hard to sharpen. Will sharpen well on ordinary stones and water stones and oil stones as well. So I thought it was a very good compromise for a steel that was reasonably well priced, had high performance values, and would give my customers the best blade I could.
So when I was making furniture, I pulled out all my original Stanley blades and put in hot irons. And then when I started making my own planes, I called Ron and said, "Can you make blades for me?" And Ron has been making blades for me ever since. And they're high carbon steel, or O1. They are very forgiving. They were marvelous to learn how to sharpen on, because they take a very, very good edge relatively quickly, and I can re-hone them very quickly, and that suited the way that I worked. So I've been predominantly I've tried a lot of other different steels, and I still kept coming back to O1 over and over and over again. And I tried the Veritas PMD11 blades a number of years ago, and it was the closest non-high carbon steel blade that I've used that acts like high carbon steel. So I liked the way that the edge wore on. And I like the way that the edge wears on high carbon. It just sort of gets dull. I don't, it's just a little bit harder to push, and the surface isn't just quite as perfect, but it doesn't chip very, very badly. And so, time to pull the blade out and re-hone it, and I found PMD11 reacted fairly similar to that. And so some of my own planes have B11 blades in them, and Valley's been generous enough to make them for me. So.
Do you find there's a surface finish difference, like the O1 produces a better surface or no? Fresh off the stones?
Fresh off the stones, no. No, but again, the way they wear, the way different pieces of steel wear is different. Mm-hmm. But yeah, all things being equal, a freshly honed blade, almost any steel is going to perform like magic. It's just once it starts degrading, how does it degrade? And that to me is, how a steel wears is actually, that's always what I'm curious about. Because I want to know how much work it's going to take to get a fresh edge back onto it.
My path is pretty simple for why I'm using O1, and of course because I'm buying the blades from Tom. That's what they're producing them in O1. So that's the path I'm going with. And as far as I'm doing my own heat treating when it comes to making the side escapement planes, and when I consider all the variables, I'm flame heat treating these things. I don't have a salt bath. There's something real extremely specialized about it. That's the one that gives me the best performance, that I can reasonably heat treat in those settings. I do make some tools that are not side escapement planes, like my spoke shades. I still stick with O1 tool steel Dare. The reason being, they're very low. They're designed for carbon Windsor chair seats, which it's a soft, wood, typically pine, a lot of times with the carbon, but they might have little pin knots that are very hard. My experience has been if you have an A2 blade It cuts perfectly fine, but if you hit those little pin knots, you're likely to chip out. Where the 01 seems to hold up against that a bit better, especially needing to be a very low cutting angle. So that's been primarily my decision based on the tooling I have for heat treating and this particular circumstances that I'm intending a tool to be used in. Also, with me, if I heat treat this tool, if I send it out to a heat treater like on my sidescape at Plains, and it came back and maybe I overheated the edge whenever I was shaping it, well, I can try to fix that. I might be able to heat treat it again and save the blade. Unfortunately, that's not always that very successful, but sometimes it works.
So we have a similar story, and we had A&O blades, and the mandate actually came from Robin, who said, go do some exploration, find another metal. We actually looked at both M2 and M4. We had blades made up. In fact, they were actually for sale. If you knew where to go on the website, they were available. The problem, and Tom's already talked about this, is that you couldn't sharpen them. You had to make an outrageous investment in diamond cutting materials to sharpen these blades. And in fact, they weren't cheap either. There was a substantial price premium. So that was kind of a non-starter. So we looked at about 20 different metals, and we also considered titanium nitride coated A2 blades as an option. And one of the engineers, in fact, he's here at our booth, he became the guru of sharpening. He is the best sharpener I've ever met after spending pretty much a summer sharpening and testing blades. So we went through these 20 or so combinations of various blade metals and various heat treatment combinations, and that was how we came up with the Mila. And it's been, well, Konrad's kind of summed it up. It performs very well. I'm very happy with it, and it's got really good market acceptance.
I use 01, if I'm honest, because I know 01 really well. And I think everybody's covered it pretty well. I do think that what I make in my business is smoothing planes in 10 different sizes and configurations, but they are all smoothing planes. You're not taking 10th thou off or doing major stock removal with what I have. So ultimate surface finish is really all I care about. And if I'm also honest, I'll tell you that when people use them, they're using them freshly sharpened. So what I care about more than anything is as sharp as I can humanly get it. I do think I can go a little tiny bit sharper with 01 than A2, maybe. But I also know that if I'm not doing a surface, I would much rather have A2 because it lasts a long time. So it's an application thing for me. But I have worked with A2 and tried heat treating A2 in my shop, and I can heat treat it and it holds an edge like crap. It is a very difficult process, whereas 01 and W1 are both incredibly forgiving. So if you're like me and I make my own blades, I send them out for heat treating as a general rule, but I like to work in prototype and turn around and do something else really fast, and I can make and heat treat a serviceable blade in my shop any minute of any day in 01 or W1, and there's not much else I can do that with. In A2, I can do that technically, but it's real iffy how well that's going to hold up. So I find 01 friendly. As a result of all of that, after 10 years, I have a very deep relationship with 01. Which may sound odd, but it's where I start every time because I know what 01, heat treated, unheat treated, annealed, spheroidized, I know what kind of an edge it can hold, for how long, I know how much curvature I can get, I know what a surface finish looks like, and understanding materials that way counts for something. It isn't always necessarily one or the other, but at this point, it's, okay, is there something other than 01 that I should use? And everything else has to beat 01 out of the room for anything that I do. And it may. It's not particularly good for hammers. Other things are better for that. But yeah, I understand 01 tactically all around in a way I don't understand it. And I think for a lot of people, that has a lot more to do with it than we really like to admit. What we become used to and know how to deal with the most have. It's hard to knock off the pedestal.